increase your revenues. The second is to develop a long-term financial plan for your capital projects. The third is to improve the borough's operations with increased efficiency. That's not a sexy one, but that's an important one that helps you not only contain your costs, but improve your overall efficiency. The goal 4 then is to develop the long-term environmental sustainability, and that's not only for the borough, but that's for your community as well. So we can go to the next slide. So increasing your revenues consists of 4 different areas. One is to create incentives. The second is to analyze your department revenue. The third is really pulling that water system revenue on its own and doing an analysis of not only your rates, but also what you're charging residential units that have more than one unit. And then the 4th one, which might be a little challenging, but gets you to start to think about the potential of creating a nonprofit campus and what that would do, not only for your revenue, but also for compatibility. So if we go to creating your incentives, which is the next slide, this is the LERTA program. And I think I talked about this when we first came down pre-COVID. I used to be a borough manager in Carnegie Borough, which is very, very similar to your borough, to Bellefonte. Build out, small community, needed a way to increase my assessable tax assessments or assessed valuation. So we developed a commercial and residential program. And on the commercial program, and a LERTA program, if you're not familiar, abates future taxes from improvements that are made on the building. So within a commercial building and residential, what they're paying now is their base rate. It stays the same. And then any improvements are abated at a certain percentage. So with a commercial, typically what you see are 10-year programs. The first year, there's 100% abatement. Second year, it's 90%. And then each year, it decreases by 10% until it's paying full taxes. With a residential program, those are typically a 3-year program where it's a full 100% abatement. And again, the abatement is only on improvements, not on the base value. With the residential program, where that comes into play and where I think we benefited in Carnegie, we had townhouse developments. We were trying to attract new residents, and we were competing against the boroughs and the townships, well, actually the townships, that had smaller tax rates than we did. They were paying, the residents were paying smaller tax bills, if you will, and that does sound familiar to what you are experiencing in Bellefonte. So it was attractive to residents because on a new home, it's a full abatement on their taxes. So for 3 years, they're abated county, school, and borough taxes, which is huge. It gives them the ability to get in their home, get established until they start to pay taxes. For the commercial properties, it's key because, as you know, those first few years for a commercial property, sometimes you don't have the tenants in years 1, 2, and 3. Again, this allows you to get a little relief on your taxes before you it starts to increase towards the end of that. And it helps financially with a developer's pro forma or with just a regular person that's coming in to buy a commercial building, restoring that building, and then getting tenants to locate in that building. So that's one program where what it does, what it costs you is time and commitment. You would need to meet with the school district. You would need to meet with the county, although the county I don't think is going to be a hard sale because they're already doing this in I think, State College Borough. But what you would need to do is sit down with the school district, help them understand that you're giving away future taxes on a project that probably wouldn't happen but for the LERTA program. So again, this doesn't cost anything financially for the borough, but you have everything to gain in those future years of new tax revenue. So we could go to the next slide. For department revenue, what we're looking at are a number of options. One is discussing the option of providing police services to the smaller communities that surround Bellefonte. That may start out at just a small range of services just to get those municipalities interested in buying into Bellefonte's police services. But we would encourage you as a way to build revenue to start to talk to them, and maybe it's, evening, sometimes in the evening or at their peak. Because although they may have the state police providing overnight coverage, there may be points in time where they need additional services from the borough. And again, starting small and then working on to larger services. Looking at other ways for your police department revenue, and again, this is an example that came from our consultant, the reimbursement for accelerated rehabilitation for DUI arrests is a way to add additional revenue to the police department. Your code department, looking at those rates, your code, and I know that Center Region COG provides those services, but looking at your rates and making sure that they're annually reviewed and they're keeping in line with what's being charged in other municipalities. The water revenue, we had, I think a few members of your council had brought this up with Noah and I during the interviews of making sure that the rates are consistent. That if you have a 4-unit apartment building, that the rates are being charged as though those were 4 single-family homes. So you're charging based on consumption, but what we also want you to look at are the flat rate and then your consumption as well. So those are 4 areas for department revenue that we encourage you to look at in order to start increasing your revenue base. Your nonprofit campus, we honestly see this as an opportunity. You've got a 100-acre parcel owned by the school district. It's already non-taxable. You've got a borough building that's located in your downtown within the waterfront district, which is a prime piece of could be a prime piece of redevelopment property. You have the Center County Commissioners that are located on a larger parcel, could be torn down and used for residential, could also be a location for an office building. It has a parking lot. Again, it's looking at these parcels and identifying them for redevelopment, taking your non-taxable uses, putting them all on one campus, and then freeing up some of these other properties for redevelopment. Consolidating some of your school buildings, again, onto that site, and then also relocating your fire departments as well. This enables the public-owned properties to be redeveloped, creates an opportunity to add properties to your tax roll, again, creating that revenue, increasing your ratables, and then creating a synergy between all the nonprofit entities where you're working with the school, the county, and the borough, as well as the fire department.
We discuss that a little further, deeper.
Sure. Yeah.
So my concern is the fire departments own their own buildings. And I don't know how easily they will give those up. I know there's been discussion about moving the 2 stations to 1 station And we're probably looking at a couple $100 million to do that in order to have the appropriate facilities for them. I'm not too confident that the county will sell that property and not keep it off the tax roll and use it for something within the county guideline, or what they might use it for. Same thing with the school district. I'm not sure how well that would go over with them either. I know that we have an elementary school that's possibly going to be relocated, or the students will be relocated to a newer school building, but we don't know what's happening with that building at this point. Nobody's really mentioned any ideas for it that I know of. And then on the water side, Ralph, if you correct me, we don't have much power on the water side because of the authority. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. We'd have to work through the authority to change the rates, but certainly they would be open for recommendations, but they ultimately would make the decision.
Okay.
And I guess that's what we know, that these aren't easy solutions. I think when you look at the water revenue probably is an easier solution, at least to do the analysis, figure out what type of revenue you could be losing, comparing your rates to other communities to determine if you are charging appropriate rates. But as it relates to like a master nonprofit campus, is there an opportunity, for one, where you have an initial discussion with at least the school district and the county? And if you feel that the fire department is not financially feasible, that's another story, although there is money out there for fire departments. We're seeing that right now with a lot of the American Rescue Plan and some of the other funding that's out there. There is money for fire departments. But as each develop the overall master plan, okay? So as the elementary school becomes in a condition that it's no longer conducive for children, that those resources are then, and that building is then ready to be located on this nonprofit master plan. The borough as well. I mean, it's sitting down with your nonprofit partners, the county and the school, to have the discussion, and this benefits the school and the county as well. I mean, because they rely on taxes too. So having first the discussion, second, developing the master plan, and then as each facility is built out, it is almost the same as when, you've got a residential development. You don't build that out all at one time. Those pieces may come on over, a number of years. But having the agreement that this is a nonprofit campus, this is the purpose, this is why we are encouraging this discussion, and see where it goes. And hopefully you have agreement with the school district where they would agree to share the property and start to relocate some of the nonprofit uses. I think with the county, if it were large enough, and honestly, as you know, it is cheaper to consolidate all your departments into one parcel or one building versus having buildings spread out all over where you're paying electricity, whether it be rent, wouldn't be rent on that building, but electricity and all the utilities and the upkeep, versus having one large building that has all the county departments.
When you're making this recommendation, did you take into account, and this would be the borough offices, the elementary school, are both in the historic district, and what the impact on the historic district is, and the federal regulations, because I think both buildings are now within the federal historic building guidelines?
But as far as the impact, I mean, we see old elementary schools converted to residential units where you keep the integrity of that building, and it would fall into your historic preservation guidelines, not that it would
Okay.
be torn down. It doesn't have to be torn down, but it can be converted and used to a parcel that would generate tax revenue. If you had it as far as young professionals, it would have earned income tax as well. So you're getting both of your tax generation, real estate and earned income in one parcel that currently isn't generating any revenue.
Basically, I think what I'm asking is that I did not see those kinds of benefit talking points in section 5 of the report. That would be helpful to us to be placed in there.
Sure. And we're going through this evening so that we are getting your input on the recommendations, and then Noah will put additional meat into step 5 that talks about why, what you have to gain, and what the ultimate cost to the borough would be.
Yeah, I would think we're going to have to put some blinders on and go straight at something, but not all these items at one time. And you know, when you look at it as a group of things to do, you know, sometimes you get the feeling, oh well, how are we going to get all this started? But the closest thing I see coming up is going to be the Centercrest nursing home that just moved all their residents to their new building, and that building I believe is sitting empty now. So to me, now's the time to try to get with the county and figure out what's going to happen to that building. But I think one thing Bellefonte can afford is I can't remember the term, but low income housing.
Right.
You know, we're almost, what are we, off about 48%?
52%.
50. Oh, we have 52 now.
We're over 50%.
Yeah, and that hurts. That's
Yeah. And you know, and that's where you can, honestly, I think your first thing out of the gate should be to develop that LERTA program, because you're going to see results from that, I think, sooner than you would think possible. What you can do is target that LERTA for specific uses. So with residential, if you want to target that for market rate housing, you can do that, because you're giving an incentive for the type of development that you want to see within the borough.
Yeah, but housing isn't going to be one of them based on, you know, I mean, there's not many lots out there in Bellefonte. They're on the outskirts, but not in Bellefonte for home, you know, for single family homes. If you looked at if you've looked at our code sheets that come in every month at the end of the month, we have zeros for probably the last, I don't know how many years, that there's been no new housing in Bellefonte. There's been renovations and things, but no new homes.
No, but I think if you took, let me just throw this in here. If you took like the Kreider Exchange and gave a developer an incentive to maybe turn that building into a condominium building, you know, they would receive a tax benefit over 10 years, and it would give them the incentive to put the money up front. It could be owner occupied condominiums, but or even like you have the Kreider Exchange, you have the Bush Arcade, these giant buildings that are in need of renovations or brought up to code, new wiring, sprinkler systems. I know when we talked about sprinkler systems, there's actually a negative incentive to invest in that, because your taxes go up, because you got to get a building permit and your assessment value goes up when putting a sprinkler system in. So, I like the idea of looking into the LERTA program.
So I think, Randy, there's a slight difference in what you're doing. These buildings would still be taxed. You wouldn't be tearing them down. It's just any improvements. So for example, I'll just give, if I hadn't put the porch back on my house, but it was a rehab and we were in the LERTA program, I could have got a tax abatement for improving the house for that portion, but I would still be paying property taxes on what was here prior to that. Yes. Correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
The other thing, Randy, is take State College Borough. they're almost built up also. And the way they're generating a new tax revenue is by building up.
Yes.
So that's why you're
Yes.
seeing high rises. And I think what Joanne and Ralph are describing is the same sort of idea within the existing buildings, not changing the facade, but recreating something inside of the walls. So
Yes.
the tax base or area doesn't broaden, it goes up, meaning we create more housing. But I see your point as we don't want, and I'll use that word, more workforce housing within the borough. We're at our limits. So how do we protect that percentage rate that we're at now? And that to me is the question. Maybe that's been explained here in this conversation, but I don't understand how that's avoided.
And that's where your LERTA program, you set the guidelines for the LERTA program. And when it comes to residential properties, it has to be, and you can set more than just, it has to be market rate, has to be owner occupied, and whatever other guidelines that you want to pull within that LERTA program, so that you're giving the carrot to the type of development that you want to see. And not everyone, it's not a borough-wide, it's targeted and it's specific for residential, for owner-occupied market rate housing. Because that's what you want to achieve in this program.
Gotcha.
Well, I will admit that I need more training in that program.
The other question I have, and that would be for Ralph, is part of the borough building in the flood zone?
Yes.
The back, yes, so the lower garage, I think the lower garage and maybe where the salt bins are in the floodplain area.
So when we talk about consolidating the borough offices or building, we would have, would we have to abate that flooding issue before the property is sold, or
No,
how does that work?
well, no, any new construction would have to build in compliance with the floodplain regulations, which usually say new construction is 1 foot above the floodplain, like your entry level floor would be 1 foot above the floodplain. So it's doable. If some hotel bought the property or something, they would have to abide, if their footprint was in the floodplain. I mean, the front corner with the setbacks and everything, it's likely that building would not, the new building would not be that close to the road, I would guess. But they could easily move it back maybe 10 feet and be outside the floodplain.
So would that violate the hysterical area rules by altering the building?
Well, it would, anything with the building would have to go through the review process. It's not a violation. It would have to be considered to go through the review process and be approved by council, and be a full-blown land development plan if you're renovating the building, adding on to it and things like that, or taking it down, whichever it is. The building is more than, we usually look at 50 years old. And even if it was 10 years old, it would still, because it's in the district, still go through the review process.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on the nonprofit campus? I guess we went back to LERTA, but it's good that you think that might be one of the first things you do. Goal 2 is to develop a long-term plan for your capital projects. This is important because it allows the borough to plan for the future. It also gives a better understanding on your fleet and rotating that, because let's face it, the newer vehicles are less cost and maintenance than some of the old equipment and buildings actually as well. So the first step in this is to develop a facilities plan. The second is your 5-year capital improvement plan. The third is your strategic plan for your police department. And the fourth is to annually establish priorities. And we know that you're starting to do that. And we would encourage that that is done on an annual basis prior to even starting to pull your budget together. So we'll talk about the facilities plan and your current municipal building. And some of those deficient areas in your municipal building and include the police department, the holding area, in your administration offices. You know, the fact that it's second floor isn't bad per se, because there are a lot of municipal buildings, State College being one, where you've got the administration and council on the second and third floors. I think with your building, where the concern might be, especially in your council chambers, you've got one ingress and egress if something should happen, getting people out of the building, getting them out safely, because you've got such a small footprint there to work with. And then the overall, the age of the building and the energy efficiency for the building itself. So looking at a facilities plan, hiring someone to come in to develop a plan based on the needs of each department. And when you look at the administration offices, is there room for expansion if you were to start to hire additional employees? Is there areas for collaboration and meeting with the public? Just looking at some of those items and developing a plan. And again, we go back to the nonprofit campus, but that doesn't necessarily mean, I think part of our conversations with council and staff was looking at another parcel. I think it was the Armory site, relocating there for a new municipal building. We think this is important as one of those first steps as well, is to develop a plan for your future, for whether it be, no matter what the location, what does the future look like for the borough as far as a municipal building? And there are, you know, funding sources available for that. There's RACP, which will provide funds for municipal buildings. You've got CDBG, which could provide some of the money for planning or design services. You have community facilities program through USDA, which provides low interest loans, 2%, and grants, depending on the size of the municipality and income level. So you've got a number of sources there that are available. USDA can match RACP, that are available, that once you have your plan together, is putting together the financial package then that allows you to move forward with a space that works for each department, is energy efficient, which lowers your operating costs, and then provides a better space for not only you as a municipality, but for your residents as well. So I talked about this, but here's the slide. So looking at the 5-year capital improvement plan, then this again allows council and staff to plan for your future and efficient replacement of borough-owned assets. So you've got this 5-year plan, you identify your priorities, you start to tackle those priorities through other sources of funding. So, you know, when you look at a capital improvement plan, you can go to the next slide, right? So it would include your road improvements, major road improvements, but also some of the minor, the resurfacing and maintenance. And you're identifying and prioritizing those projects. Stormwater, it's inventory, it's developing that inventory and making sure that all of that infrastructure is in operable condition. And where some of that infrastructure may be aged, what's your plan for replacement? And then what's your plan as well for incorporating new systems and possibly rain gardens to allow for improvement in your stormwater system. The next are your park facilities. So what are the areas for new trails and greenways that maybe haven't been identified in a current recreation plan? Where are areas for pocket parks and community gardens? And again, identifying priorities in that regard and determining the costs associated with that. Major equipment, and this is for you departments, public works, police department, sanitation, water. Looking at your equipment, looking at the age, determining what is the, what are the future needs, not only short-term, but long-term. And then what this does is help to inform your annual budget.
Okay, I have 2 questions on this page.
Okay.
The first one is pocket parks. Would that be inclusive of, and there's just started some discussion in our streets committee of creating bump outs on like Allegheny Street and putting mini parklets where like the restaurants could put a dining facility, dining tables, and so that would be helpful so that people know what you mean by a pocket park. Right now we have the smallest park in the state. I understand it's across the street from Talleyrand Park. It's about 40 feet by about 60 feet, something like that. It's really, really tiny.
So what we'll do there, Joanne, is give you images of what we're thinking as far as pocket parks and some of those public spaces. And again, when you look at those bump outs and providing a space for restaurants, that's not only important for restaurants, especially in this day and age where they're looking for that outdoor space, but it also creates that energy and excitability and synergy that people that may be traveling through Bellefonte get excited to say, hey, I'm like, can't stop to eat right now, but I'm going to be coming back to Bellefonte. They've got those outdoor eating areas now. And again, it provides that kind of excitement in downtown Bellefonte.
Okay.
So we'll get some examples and images for you.
Okay. The second question, and you say constant infusion of new equipment. How are you defining new? New to us, even though it might be used equipment that we're using? Or are you talking about brand new equipment with a larger upfront? And if so, how could recommendations on how we could reduce the cost? Thing that I think. Go ahead.
We are talking about new equipment.
Brand new equipment.
Because with new equipment, your operating costs are going to decrease. You've got the capital outlay. Now, when it's public works department equipment, it's liquid fuels can pay for that. We also, and I don't know if you've used the Pennsylvania Infrastructure Bank in the past at all. And no, okay. And those are 10-year low-interest loans through PennDOT, and they can be used for equipment, but they also can be used for road improvement. And you can use your liquid fuel. In fact, you're to use your liquid fuel to repay that loan. So that's an option when it is a piece of equipment that well exceeds what your annual allocation would be. You can spread that out over a longer time period and pay that back with liquid fuels.
So that doesn't include police then. It's just public works equipment.
It doesn't. We'll have to look at some of the federal funds through the Department of Justice, PCCD. Maggie does a lot of application work through PCCD for equipment for police departments.
Yeah, PCCD usually runs at least 5 different types of equipment programs. So they have body-worn cameras, bulletproof vests, and they have a bunch of other programs too. And then I think it's FEMA, through PEMA, has the Firefighters Assistance Program. And with the new American Rescue Plan, they put in a couple of million extra dollars into that program to fund fire equipment, vehicles, and even fund capital projects like new firehouses and stuff.
What about police vehicles? That's the
I'm
one
pretty
that's
sure-
coming up like in the next couple of months. That's why I'm asking.
I can follow up with you
Well,
about
we'll
that.
include that in.
Yeah.
We'll include that in here as far as any potential funding sources for police vehicles, because we know that that's usually not an area that is covered, but we'll look at DOJ, PCCD, and now we're going to talk about funding your capital improvements on this next page. Now you are aware that you will be getting money through the American Rescue Plan.
Mhm.
Okay. Have they given you your an amount yet?
Yes,
Yes.
617,000 and some odd change.
Okay. Okay. And have you talked about how you plan on spending those dollars? Because, okay.
No.
Not yet.
We haven't even seen the details, you know,
Yeah.
the regulations or whatever, the red tape that goes with it. But
Ralph,
Once
I'm
we-
attending a meeting tomorrow afternoon, just before I go get my shot,
Okay.
that is talking about the American Rescue Plan and its effect on municipal governments in Pennsylvania. So I'll know a little
Good.
bit more after that.
Good.
Well, we do know that it can be used to replace lost revenue in order to provide government services. So if you had lost revenue last year with your earned income tax and property tax, compared 2019 to 2020, that amount can be used to replenish that so you can continue to provide government services. You can use it for infrastructure projects, so water, sewer, and broadband. You can use it to cover the costs or the negative impacts of COVID-19. We have some municipalities that are looking at using that for parks and recreation because of the fact that with many of the gyms closed and people were not forced, but really forced to use outdoor recreation, and with limited facilities, that's an area where they're looking at as far as using some of those resources. Now with yours being block granted because of your population, will come through DCED. So it'll probably be viewed as state funds. So, you know, we have some counties that are getting, well, all the counties are getting it directly from the Treasury. They're going to be able to use those federal dollars to match state dollars for maybe a program for infrastructure, which allows them to spread that money a little bit more. But those are some of the things, you know, to think about, especially with any infrastructure projects, because you can use those funds for water and sewer. The other, and you may have heard this, you may maybe not, but earmarks are back. And so those are federal funds. There are different pots. There's through the Department of Interior, there is a program called STAG, it's State and Tribal Government. That money can be used for water and sewer projects. You have the Department of Agriculture and the Community Facilities Program. Again, that's where we talk about your municipal building being a community facility. And I can send, because the window is a tight window, I can send the information to Dawn and Ralph. There are forms that need to be prepared. We can help you fill out those forms. But maybe that's an opportunity too to get an earmark in for a police vehicle or one or two under DOJ. We'll have to look at that.
Yeah.
But I'll send the forms to you, I'll send the information, and then if Ralph and Dawn, if you want to have a conference call, we can talk through it, talk through the process, and you can get those to Congressman Keller's office. Each congressional district will be able to have 10 projects
We're not
So they'll-
Congressman, we're not Congressman Cala. We're
Are you
Congressman,
Thompson?
yes,
Thompson.
Thompson.
Okay, so we can get them to Congressman Thompson. We'll have to see when he's accepting appropriation forms. I don't think his are open yet, so we may have a little bit of time. The Senate will be going through the same process. And we just got a letter from Senator Casey, can share that with you. Same form, so we can work on identifying what you may want to seek an earmark for, and then help you get those forms to the appropriate offices. But this
Ralph,
is
I'm sorry, Teresa, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
that's okay.
I'm thinking of our water tank, Ralph.
yes, water tank, the big spring cover, there's easily a couple $1 million projects right there.
Okay. And that would be a good project for the Department of Interior through the STAG. So we'll, again, I'll get that to you and then we can get together and figure out what you want to advance.
Right.
So aside from that, and aside from your American Rescue Plan, you've got your state programs, DCD, and you're familiar with these, multimodal, flood control, greenways, PennDOT, multimodal, traffic signals, road improvements, DCNR, your parks, your ball fields, your greenways, and your trails. Now the PCCD, again, looking at that for your police department needs. Office of the Budget, good source for your municipal projects. And we'll look at some of those other EDA for an economic development initiative where you've got a larger initiative. Look at that too and adding that in there for any kind of projects that may make sense. So we'll include, I think Noah's already started to map this out on the table. We'll make sure we have some of those federal resources in there as well. So the next is the strategic plan for your police department. And again, this is looking at the appropriate levels, staffing levels. We have included in the plan where we did look at some of the costs for, Lewistown Borough. I think we looked at Chambersburg, and you're trending higher per person. So looking at the staffing levels, looking at software systems to reduce administrative paperwork, this is schedules, assignment of overtime, tracking hours and overtime, and then looking at possibly the state police to augment. That may or may not make sense. With your software system, part of the strategic management plan, the funding source for this also provides funds for implementation. So your technology, both for the police department as well as, I think we had encouraged that for code and for nuisance code and for public works. And that's a source to provide funds for that technology. And that can go, it depends on the modules you want to purchase. It can be as small as $5,000 up to, I think we saw $1 million. And again, looking at submitting an application, a future application through the STAMP program to help offset the costs associated with those systems. Those systems will provide a more efficient operation in all your departments, and again, decreasing manpower and making you more efficient in your operations. The last is this annual strategic planning session. You're already embarking on this initiative, but putting together your capital improvements plan is again one of your first tasks that you should start to work on coming out of the gate. So looking at each department, looking at each area, understanding what those projects are, what the costs associated with those projects, having the funding sources included with that and developing this matrix. And then what is the local commitment? What's the borough's commitment and financial commitment to those projects? And then identifying those grant opportunities and applying for funds. Goal 3 is improving your internal operations, and this is the one I said it's probably for most makes your eyes glaze over. I guess maybe for us because we're economic development and we like to get into the guts of that. But these are important because it's important again to make sure that your operations are smooth and that you've got everything in place. You've started to do your annual reviews, performance reviews. That's good not only for council, but for your staff. Setting goals and setting objectives every year. Providing opportunities for continuing education. And again, part of the strategic management plan process is to have everyone properly trained. Those could also be identifying some of those within your next implementation steps and seeking funds for that as well. As you start to implement some of the other, like the LERTA and increasing revenue, that will give you, I like your partner there, Ralph, that will give you opportunities to provide training. Integrating technology into all your borough operations. And again, this ties back to some of what we discussed before, but also having that funding source available through the stamp. Updating your police department and manuals, getting those to 2021, incorporating some of the new language within there as well. Adopting a code of ethics, and I know you have some of this, but just incorporating or adopting a formal code of ethics plan. Surveying your residents periodically, and this is important to understand their needs and their satisfaction of your services, and that's twofold. Again, it goes back to this planning, making sure that you're providing what your residents are looking for, but also keeping them satisfied helps attract new residents down the road. So this is a key piece that you should be doing every few years. And then also finalizing a reporting system where your boards and commissions are reporting to you on an annual basis of what their accomplishments has been in the past year, whether it's your planning commission, some of your ad hoc committees, whether it's your HARB, just having that formalized, having it on your website so that your residents know what's going on. That also helps in attracting or getting volunteers from your residents to participate in some of these ad hoc committees and boards and commissions. Your last goal is environmental sustainability, and this is not just for the borough, but it's for your commercial and residents as well. Developing a building rehab program, and it's targeted for commercial and industrial. It would be, the goal of that would be to have a forgivable loan where it is really a grant, but if the property owner were to sell their property, whatever is remaining, if it's a 10-year, 10% would be forgiven each year. If they sell in year 5, then 50% of that principal would be payable back to the borough. And this would be funded through CDBG. So we're looking at removal of slums and blight, looking for historic preservation, where you're eliminating conditions that are detrimental to public health and safety, which fall under those CDBG guidelines. We're also looking at a residential program, and that's a rehab program. And this not only improves your housing stock, but it also goes to the environmental sustainability for utilities, weatherization, housing rehab programs can new roofs, new windows, new appliances, new doors. It allows the home to be brought up to code. And we're encouraging to look at home and possibly some of your CDBG home funds that are administered through DCD, provide resources for owner-occupied housing rehab. Keystone community programs can also be used for owner-occupied housing rehab. Those can be matched with home funds, which are federal. And then FAIR has a program that was initially developed for communities that were part of Marcellus Shale. They have amended that and to include some of the realty transfer tax, and now it's available to all 67 counties. Again, this can be used for housing rehabilitation. So it's a twofold program, one for commercial and industrial, the other for housing. With a housing rehab program, it's a 5-year forgivable loan. It has to be targeted for your low mod income households. And the goal of that is to provide funding for them, which allows them to bring their home up to code at no cost to them, because you're funding that with both state and federal resources.
It's related to the LERTA program.
So Ralph, would this be something that we could have IDA look at as well? I know they do it industrial, and I'm wondering if we could use IDA in this area. I know they do mostly industrial, but could we include some residential in there if we get something like this moving along?
I think so, Randy. I think the IDA is open to revitalizing the borough, residential, commercial, industrial, whatever it is. I know that, of course, the borough proper has given them allotment of funds to use. And I do know they were looking at some residential properties to get started. So yeah, that's very possible.
Teresa, did you hear my question?
No, I didn't.
I asked, how does this program interleave with the LERTA program?
Well, with those improvements, depending on the improvements, I mean, typically when you're putting in new appliances, maybe windows, I don't know that your assessed valuation is going to go up that much, but they could also, because it's owner occupied, participate in the LERTA program if their assessed valuation was to increase. So we would have to look at that and talk with, I think, the assessor's office to determine what items or what improvements would kick them into a reassessment or increase in tax assessed valuation. Now with the LERTA, I mean, and that's the other selling point, I think, too, with some of your low mod income households who may not want to participate in a rehab program for the fear that their taxes are going to go up. Offering them a tax abatement program, again, is as a way to get them incentivized to improve their home. The improvement not only provides, a benefit to the borough, but also, again, it's the environmental sustainability, and it's that footprint in the borough where your residential properties, commercial and industrial, are using less energy within the borough. That's the other key piece of this housing rehab program, where you're going in and making everything work more efficiently. Does that answer your question? Okay. So the final is the borough as far as environmental sustainability, and looking at renewable energy, whether it's a solar farm to generate some of your consumption, reducing your energy costs. Again, this goes back to your facilities plan, where we're encouraging you to look at a new facility that would decrease your output. Some of the grant programs that are available are the High Performance Building Program, Renewable Energy Program, Solar Energy Program, and then ACE that provides funding and grants for nonprofits for renewable and high performance buildings. The last slide, if you can see that, is looking at your compost and recycling, expanding those efforts, promoting that Habitat for Humanity. And I think that's the one thing that Noah had mentioned, that when he was looking at programs, Habitat for Humanity, that building material reuse warehouse didn't come out on any type of information. So promoting that, looking at including that information in your newsletters, in your utility bills, just a constant reminder to residents that may think that, okay, I'm replacing my stove, may not be that old, but can be reused by somebody else, replacing other parts in their home that could be reused by somebody else, but giving that constant reminder to your residents to recycle, and then expanding that to composting for residential food waste and promoting that program as well. Promoting your West Penn Power Commercial and Industrial Energy Efficiency Rebate Program. As it comes to CATA, expanding those services to possibly include the weekends, but also, more importantly, is encouraging your residents to use the bus for transportation. And again, decreasing the fossil fuels and the use of their car, and using the CATA bus for transportation. Looking at permeable.
Stop for 1 second. Our service is basically, looking past July, is probably not going to be the regular bus. It's going to be the van service that CATA provides, which the community is thrilled with. Because it's door-to-door service, and it takes us from here to connect with the buses in the State College area, where they have the population to actually fill up a bus. So more important, and we'll include that information in there, but promoting that to your residents and encouraging them to use that service to decrease the amount of cars and congestion and emissions that is currently within the borough, because you are a very compact, tight community. Incorporating permeable materials into your sidewalk projects where appropriate. Again, when you're looking at some of those quote unquote pocket parks, or those areas for dining, starting to incorporate some of this material, which allows for stormwater control. Identifying those areas for rain gardens, and again, allowing that for stormwater, but also beautification, where you're not just looking at concrete throughout the borough. You have areas that are pretty, but they serve a dual purpose. And then as part of the CIP transition, where appropriate, gas-powered vehicles to electric vehicles where possible. And again, reducing the emissions and fossil fuels within the borough. And that concludes our recommendations as part of this management plan process. Any questions? Any comments? Are you asking?
Johnny,
Go ahead, John.
Teresa, I guess the one comment I would have, and we started back with talking about new buildings and such like that. But we're conducting this meeting by Zoom, and the beauty of that is we don't
see John talking, but I don't know if I can't hear him.
I can hear him.
Anybody else hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear
I
you.
hear you, John.
Yeah. So we're conducting this by Zoom, which minimizes the need for a large conference room, and it also addresses that ingress and egress issue, which is truly a real significant issue. I mean, we like to think it doesn't, but in this day and age, it is a real concern. And the other thing, I'm looking at the independent fiscal office, and for months, they've been telling us that remote working is here to stay. Lease space for buildings isn't needed. I guess I'm a little baffled why we would be building new buildings instead of just figuring out how to minimize the amount of space we currently have and maybe utilizing that space without spending the money for the capital project.
But I think that's the kind of information that you'll discuss during your facilities planning process. What are your needs? I wouldn't say, here's what I would say. I don't know that we'll be forever working from home. I mean, yeah, right now we are because we're in the middle of a pandemic. People still need to socialize. This isn't the best way to hold a public meeting. There are people that want to be a face-to-face, and especially probably some of your older generation, but don't think that this is going to be the way that it probably will be in the future. I mean, you're going to need, when we're finding, right, even with the school systems, the fact of the impact that it's had on mental depression and not having that socialization, even for your workforce, having an area where, and maybe it's just a co-workspace, maybe it's a smaller building than what you need, but having those areas where people can still come into the office, still engage. I mean, we worked for 3 months out of pocket. Yeah, and it felt like 3 years, honestly. It felt like 3 years, and wasn't as I think, conducive because we lacked the ability to interact and engage. And I think you're going to find that although there might be some facilities, you're a public entity, you're a public building, and having the ability to have the public in your building is going to be important. But again, that's going to be some discussion that you hold in the future. We're going to know as people are vaccinated and as we start to come out and we start to, be free again, what the new world looks like. But I think you're still going to find that you're going to need a facility that's conducive for the public and interacting with the public.
I appreciate your opinion, but I would also offer that if during my working years, I would have never been able to truly be a councilman if things would have had to have been in person. And, what I see from this format is we could basically have a new younger generation of council people that can participate in all the council meetings and all the committee meetings, and they don't have to be in the building. They can be in their home they can be on travel wherever, and they can be conducting the borough's business. So I guess I see the building idea as an artifact and something that's going to fade away after this event.
Okay. Any other comments?
Hi, Teresa. This is Ralph. Around us, I heard on the news, I think it was up around Du Bois to the west of us, that they were looking at merging. I think there's a township that surrounds them, similar to Bellefonte and Spring Township. Is that something that's a possibility for small boroughs like us that could merge with a surrounding municipality and have the bigger tax base, have 24-hour police coverage? We have 2 water systems, we have 2 police departments, we have 2, almost 2 of everything. And there's probably at least 3 fire departments. So is there any value in looking or considering what these other places, or at least this place around Du Bois, is looking at, or maybe even doing? What's the thoughts about something like that?
And I don't know if you remember, I think it was in the early 2000s, maybe even previous to that, Center Region looked at that for State College and the
Yes,
Center
I
Region
do.
municipalities.
Yes.
And I think we can most definitely include that as something that you can look at doing, because you're right. Because what it does is, you have one police chief, right? You have one
Yes.
administration.
Right.
You can share resources. The challenge there will be is having residents, and it may not be the same issue with your surrounding municipalities, but who's police chief, if there is I don't know if there's multiple, if you're combining with another police department, which chief gets retained. Having residents who feel that they're losing their identity as well. So I think what we'd like to do is include that as an option. And again, that's for in your efficiencies and operations. And look at pros and cons and the process, because that has to be voted on by referendum.
Sure.
So the residents in each municipality would need to vote on that. But we most definitely can include that, look at that as far as savings and what the process would be in order to merge with your surrounding municipalities.
Okay, sounds good.
And we'll give the example of Du Bois and some of the other. I don't know that there are a lot of municipalities that have merged in Pennsylvania. But we'll add that into the goal for
To go along
operating
with,
efficiency.
Teresa, to go along with what Ralph is proposing, perhaps we could do it a little bit at a time. And that would mean maybe merge police forces, or consolidate police forces, maybe consolidate wastewater and water authorities, maybe consolidate, I'm missing something here, Ralph. I'm thinking make it attractive to both Bellefonte residents and, for in this case, Spring Township residents. What would be the method? And I guess this is for internal discussion to encourage something like this, just like Ralph's. I forgot the other one, which was our fire departments. Ralph is very accurate. We would have actually 4: Undine, Logan's, Pleasant Gap, 3. And I don't know if we draw from Milesburg or not, but I think if we would take pee-pee steps at first with one trial program, that maybe we could encourage it to grow. And we would have to decide as council as what would be our first step to make that maybe start happening.
And which one makes sense as far as the current relationship that you may have with one of your surrounding neighbors as well? But that does make sense that you would ease into the water before jumping in, you know, at first.
I understand where Doug's coming from on that, and I understand where Ralph's coming from, but I think there's going to be challenges with residents. We haven't mentioned Benner Township, who would be, well, even Spring. It really depends on what those costs are going to look like to each resident and where they're at. And I think Benner would probably be a tough sale at this point, and possibly even in Spring for some of the items. But yeah, it's worth looking at. But I'm just, you know, I don't know. We do well with the Nittany Valley, the groups. We have Benner Township, we have Spring Township, we have Bellefonte Borough, we have Marion Township that are all part of. There's 5 members to this, and we've been trying to work with the fire departments here recently, getting back on track with trying to look at the equipment and who has what and what's duplicated and how many of these do we need and all that types of things. But we're not looking at a consolidation of the fire departments. We're just trying to look at how we can save money when we do need to purchase these big apparatus, because we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for a purchase of something like that. That's going to go in somebody's building. The question would be, whose building would that be? So I think it's, you know, the police would be the same thing. I know Chief Weaver would probably, I hope they agree with me, but they do work with Spring Township pretty consistently, I think, in this area. And I know at times they've gone out to Benner Township and probably Spring as well, depending on the area that they're covering, because Benner all goes with state police, and if state police are busy, our guys get called. So there is workability there. It's just a matter of how can we turn that into some money our way.
Yep.
Randy, I think just to clarify what Ralph might have been referring to is the city of Du Bois was annexing in the township that surrounds them. So I think what we were thinking is, more of an annexation of no more Spring Township. It would just all be Bellefonte Borough. So it would be an expansion, so to speak, of the borough, providing the borough more land, more possibilities for growth, in addition to all the integration of departments and so forth. So I think that's what we were referring to.
Yes.
There's still a lot of duplication, even in the, with what we have now. There's a lot of duplication in leadership and what Spring Township does to what Bellefonte does in our ordinances. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it shouldn't be something that, it should be off the table. I mean,
I'm not saying it needs to be off the table. I just say it's going to be tough.
Well, just like a lot of the other things involved here, but I mean, it might be 15, 20 years from now, it might be more of something that it might not be tough. It might be something that's almost you're going to have to do to survive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, we can add a piece on that. Yep. Any other comments?
What's our next steps?
We're going to get, if you're all comfortable, and then we'll include this stuff, we're going to get Maggie and Noah have been working on Joanne's comments. and we'll be getting that back to you. That's step 1 through 4, and that should be finalized. And Noah and I will work on.
I also did 5.
Right, but Noah and I will be working on pulling together the meat behind step 5, giving you some more information on how you go about doing this, looking at some of those other revenue sources, giving you examples of LERTA programs elsewhere and how they've used them, how they've targeted development. With this new annexation, we'll give you some examples there as well. So we hope, we'd like to get that to you within the next 2-week period. And then ask that you go to the next step in adopting the plan.
Yeah,
So,
Teresa, just so you know that Joanne's comments came in the form of the actual document, but there was another singular page where other council members had comments. I just want to make sure that you received those as well.
We did.
Okay, thank you.
the other thing, when you're going through and doing these revisions, one thing that I noticed between 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is some of the recommendations in 5 either were not reflected in 1, 2, 3, and 4, or you had indicated in 1, 2, 3, and 4 that there had been a change in the document there, but when it got to 5, it didn't show up, and it looked like we were going back to square one again. So I think it needs to be consistent.
Okay. Okay. And what we'll have before we send this back out is have our QA department go through and QA the document and look at those consistency issues as well.
Teresa, it's Doug Johnson, and this may be insignificant. When you go to population, one page will say 6,200. Then you go into the police part, it says 6,700. I don't know. Does that need to be consistent in this description? It jumped like 500 people.
Yeah. So when I initially ran the demographic data it would have been last March, the 2015-2019 ACS was not published yet. So I was using the 2012 to 2017 ACS and the 2019 United States Census Bureau population estimates. I have gone through the introduction to step 1 and updated, checking for inconsistencies, and I will make sure to run it past the other documents as well, like the police department document.
Okay.
So yes, so short answer, it should all be consistent.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Good evening. This is Mike Carpenter from DCD. Teresa, do you have a time frame for when you're going to turn this final report around and address those issues in 1 through 5 that the Borough Council had offered comment edits? Do you have a, yeah.
Yeah, so 1 through 4, Maggie and Noah have been working on. That should be back to council by the end of this week. Step 5, we're going to add what we discussed this evening, include the meat of that, and get that to them within the next 2-week period.
Thank you.
So, can I see your calendar? And we've been working on putting the meat of that in. So April, where are we at now? 20. So by
29.
Go back into April.
Sorry.
So by April 12th, at the latest, we'll have the step 5 to you in final form, and then ask that you move forward with adopting that plan.
If it's April 12th, our next council meeting would be April 15th, and I'm not sure that we would be able to get through it in time to actually do any passages like that. It would probably have to go into May before we could actually do those kind of steps. I just don't think it's feasible with as long as these documents are, and as long as, in my own case, how long it took me to get through all of them, that to have only 3 days and just basically the weekend that we would be able to do anything with it the following council meeting.
You'll have step 1 through 4 in advance of that though, Joanne, which is, that's pretty substantial.
That's the longer.
And what Maggie has done, you have a clean copy, but you'll also have the marked up copy. So you can see what your comments were and the changes that were made. So you don't have to go back and reread through the whole document again. You'll see where your comments were and the changes that were made, which should make it easier for you to navigate through those documents.
The second meeting for us, Joanne, is the 19th. So if we did get it by the 12th, we'd have, a week to review it. And then if there isn't enough time, we could bump it to the first meeting in May.
I would recommend that we kind of regroup once we get everything back and we regroup in a special meeting and get through some of this stuff, because I think trying to do this during a regular council meeting, we will be there a long time. And I think if we can go through, if we get something this week through the 1 through 4, and we can get together once that comes in and go over that and everybody's comfortable with it, then we do that again with number 5 and do the same thing. So by the time we come to a meeting, we're pretty much on the same page with things and comfortable with what we have. Because maybe we have to go back and get something tweaked again.
Teresa and Maggie, just for your own information, that 6,700 is on page 20 of the step 4 management audit review. And it's the 3rd paragraph down. It says community of 6,700 residents. I don't think that's accurate.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
So I only had one other question. I don't know if it came up, but on the charts that were shown in steps 1 through 3, it talked about the businesses and it listed businesses, but I know it didn't list all the businesses in Bellefonte. So I'm not quite sure what those numbers were trying to describe or demonstrate for us. I mean, we can look at our budget and figure out, with monies coming in through taxes and things like that. But I just, I'm not sure how we can work with a list that's not a complete list if we have to look at each business.
Yeah, I think I had a similar comment in mine, is that it looked like in that particular table, you were trying to list all of the businesses that had 10 or more employees. And I don't think it was a complete list, only because I could think off the top of my head that has at least 10 that wasn't listed there. So I'm agreeing with Randy. What does that table mean and how do we interpret it?
So those numbers were pulled from Esri Business Analyst, and we did have to spot check because some of those businesses, as we found out at the last time we went over it, are no longer in the borough. But that is the most up-to-date data set that I'm able to obtain on the businesses. Now, I can include a list of all of the ones that are pulled from Esri Business. It's like 250, I think. But initially, I think the gist was to pull out the businesses that were 10 and up employee-wise, and then focus on the ones that are bringing in the most money for the borough. So we did condense that list, just because if not, it would have been 10, 15 pages of a table with a bunch of businesses. But like I said, we can include the complete list.
And the challenge that we have, because we have MC data, which is more on a county level. S3 data is a little bit older. On the map is a lot older. Because of the borough is so small, it's hard to get up-to-date data. MC data we purchased because it provides business data from the last quarter. So 2020, fourth quarter of 2020. But because the borough, we can't get it to the granular level of the borough. On the map is 2 years old. So that's the challenge we have. And I think the purpose behind that employee or employer business data is just to give a sense of who those larger employers are, who you need to keep an eye on as far as if they were to close their doors, what would that mean to the borough? So having that, I think, as more of maybe the top 10 employers versus a list that includes, 10 or more. But who are those top 10 employers? These are the ones that you need to keep track of, better understand their environment, their financial environment, because if they were to close their doors tomorrow, what would that mean for the borough? Does that make sense?
So this includes governmental employers, nonprofit employers, and commercial employers, correct?
Right.
Okay.
But even on the public sector, even though it's a public sector, if something were to happen within the county government and they started to shed some of those employees, how does that impact? It's not just the LST tax, but it's also what impact does that have on your business district? And I always go back to the example in downtown State College, where the borough's municipal building used to be on Fraser Street. They relocated it to Allen Street. All those employees shifted to Allen Street, and you felt that impact for some of those retail businesses and restaurants that were located on Fraser. So when you look at, say, the county building or the county commissioners, county government, the number of employees, because I think they are like one of the top employers, what would that mean if they start to downsize and they start to move their departments out? What impact would that have on the borough? So that's the basics or the reason behind having that table is just, the thought of the impact of losing employees and what that means not only for borough revenue, but also for your businesses.
Teresa, there's one you might be missing, and I'll just, if you care to add it, we do have Mount Nittany, help me, Ralph, Mount Nittany Administrative Building, or they probably have 30 to 50 employees there.
Yeah, it's Mount Nittany Medical Center, administrative offices, or something like that. We can get you an exact title, Teresa.
Teresa, there's at least 30 to 40 cars in the parking lot every day.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
I think their actual number, Doug, is around 200.
At that building.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
but of course with COVID, I'm sure people are working from home, but yeah, it's
pretty substantial, Teresa.
So, and that's what I guess I would ask from you is, can Maggie work with your tax collector to pull that kind of information? Because I know the Mount Nittany is probably newer than what S3 is pulling, and that's why that's not included in there. Can Maggie work with your tax collector to get a better number on that? And is that information that's allowed to be shared?
we're okay with that. We would try to help you with that. Yes.
Well,
Okay.
let me ask you a related question, because what you just asked about was for, I assume, non-public employers, because that's what Mount Nittany Medical Center is. There are, the one that I sent you in my comments is a nonprofit. And so that would not be getting off of our property taxes. That would have to come through our LST. So it's
Right.
So they would have to be working with both well, I guess it would be the center tax agency.
But honestly, I think what we would only want to look at is the LST, because we're looking at number of employees because it's the number that they employ within the borough. Because we only want to look at the borough. If they have other branches, say a bank that has other branches that are outside of the borough, that doesn't really impact you. So working with, if you could provide, who handles the LSTs, your tax collector, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if you could give her authorization for us to access that kind of data. Now, having said that, I think we would want to keep it just to those top 20 or 25, not based on numbers, but who are those top 20 or 25 employers, because we're going to get more up-to-date information than what we're pulling from ESRI.
We can help you with that.
Okay.
Does that
Okay,
answer
well,
your
if you think
question,
of-
Joanne? Does that get you? Okay, good.
If anything else you think of within the next few days, let us know. But our goal is to get a markup document and a clean document to you by the end of this week. That's doable. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Bye-bye.
All righty, take care.
Goodbye.
Bye, Maggie.
Do you want to hang up on the phone?
Everybody good for now? Till we get to most recent drafts?
Ralph, could you forward me
Yes.
that?
I'm sorry, Sean, what?
I didn't get a copy of the latest one. Can you?
Yes, we can forward it to you. We have 5 here and then 1 through 4, 2 separate documents.
So do we want to consider a special meeting for the items coming in at the end of this week for sometime next week? It's up to council, I guess, but.
We do it the following week because next Monday's our regular council meeting.
Right.
Yeah, then Tuesday's the authority meeting and so on. So yeah, it might be better to shoot for that second Monday of the month.
I mean, yeah, everybody have an opportunity to look at it and should be prepared when we go into that meeting. It shouldn't be the first time they're looking at it.
Do you want to do a doodle calendar?
Well, we can. Now, keep in mind, Teresa just said, we talked about the second Monday, that would be the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
So she said she would have the last document to us by the 12th. And going with what Randy just said, you wouldn't want it the day of the meeting. You'd want it ahead of time. So maybe later that week or, somewhere around of course, the 19th is our second meeting of the month.
I would rather see us just do one meeting, the
Let's
fourth
go.
Monday of April, and handle all 5 that one night, and then come back the first meeting in May and adopt it.
That would be probably the best. You'd have everything in front of you and time to look at it.
I mean, we've already been over 1 through 4 like 3 times now, so we should have that one getting.
We should be able to read it in our sleep.
Well, that one I think you're supposed to have by the end of this week.
Right.
You'd only be down to 5,
Yeah, I agree. I think doing it to the end of the month and putting the passage in May is a much better idea. I think we're just pushing it a little too much and too fast. And in fact, that 12th is also the planning commission meeting, so you would be
Oh, yeah.
conflicting with that, so you couldn't do it then anyway.
True.
And the
It'd be tough.
14th is the IDA, so we wouldn't squeeze it in there. I think right now we all know that the fourth Monday of the month would be open pretty much.
Yeah.
I'm good with Don's suggestion.
Well, we can send out a doodle, but we can tentatively pencil in or put on the calendar the fourth Monday in April.
I'm good with that, Ralph, too.
All right, why don't we say 6:30, the fourth Monday in April,
Okay.
and
Okay.
we'll advertise that and everything.
Do we need to do that? Do we need to do that officially at the meeting Monday night?
I think someone should bring it up and say this is our plan.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Good for now.
If I don't see everyone, have a nice Easter weekend.
You too.
Yes.
Hey,
You too.
hey, Dawn,
Yeah,
Dawn.
Sean.
Noah's going to States Wednesday, Pittsburgh, for the Keystone Wrestling. Noah.
Really?
Yeah. He took fourth in Johnstown yesterday.
Oh, that's
So he's
great,
in the
Sean.
state.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yep. So
Enjoy.
okay.
See you
See ya.
later.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
See ya.